without having your guests feel like you skimped. Today, we have Jessica Bishop of the Budget Savvy Bride with us. Jessica is the founder of the budgetsavvybride.com, the top online wedding resource for couples who want to plan a wedding on a budget that they can actually afford. The website shares tons of helpful wedding planning advice, money-saving tips, exclusive wedding discounts, free printables, and other helpful tools to use every step of the way. Jessica is also a published author. Her book, The Budget Savvy Wedding Planner and Organizer, is an Amazon bestseller that has received high praise from brides and grooms across the country. So we are super excited to have you here today to talk about how to save money, because definitely it can add up when you're planning your wedding.
Yeah, it definitely can. And I think everybody's looking to save no matter how much they might have to spend. So
exactly. I always joke that, it doesn't matter what your budget is, it's still a budget, and it's still, you still have some kind of limits, right?
Yeah, unless you're a Kardashian, maybe.
Exactly. So let's just start. Let's talk about where are some of the best places to save. How do you pick where you should try to save money on your wedding?
So I think it's really important to start out by, setting your priorities with your partner, getting really clear on, what's important to you, what you both value, not just for the wedding day, but also in your life. I think it kind of overlaps a lot when you look at, your priorities. So, if your top priority is photography because you both love looking at those beautiful wedding photos, maybe you're going to put more of your budget towards your photography. Or if you both are foodies and your favorite thing to do on Friday nights is go out and try the best new restaurant, maybe you're going to put more of your budget towards your food. So really, I think your wedding is a good exercise in defining your priorities and your values together as a couple, and then allocating your budget accordingly to those items that you find to be most important.
I love that. We had a couple that we talked with, and they had a $10,000 budget, and they spent $5,000 of it on their photographer because that was their biggest priority, and then they just made everything else work. So I think you're so right that picking those priorities is a big one when it comes to budget, and having that conversation at the beginning is definitely super helpful.
Absolutely. And I find it a lot, actually. One of the things that we do on our website is we feature a real budget wedding every week, and the couple shares kind of their budget breakdown and how they spent their money. And looking at their wedding budgets, you can tell what was most important to them because you can see where they spent the majority of their money. And I would say, the majority of the weddings that we feature, those couples do place a high priority on photography, and it tends to take up a larger portion of the budget. So it's always interesting to see that.
I love it. That's awesome. So how do you recommend actually sitting down and prioritizing your wedding? And what if you guys disagree? How do you kind of figure out what are those top things to spend the money on?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something you should do right from the beginning because it will kind of dictate how you allocate your budget. And, looking at maybe what each of your top 3 priorities are and comparing that list. Ideally they would overlap, but they don't always. So in those cases, that's a good test, your first test in marital compromise. But yeah, I think it's an important conversation to have. And one thing that I always tell couples to keep in mind is to consider the guest experience as well, in identifying those priority items. Everybody, I think a lot of brides, they think a lot about their wedding dress, and of course they want to wear a beautiful dress on their wedding day, but if you only have 10 grand to spend, are you going to spend 5 of it on a wedding dress? That seems a little bit out of sorts to me. But if that is your priority, you can find a way to make it work, if your partner's on board with that. But I do think that it's important to think about who is actually affected by this decision and these aspects of your wedding day that you're putting more money into. So it's something I like to tell people to keep in mind.
I think that's great advice because this is probably one of the biggest parties you've ever hosted, and so you are the host, so keep that in mind when you're thinking about those priorities. And you probably have to talk to people who are contributing to the budget as well. Sometimes parents or other people are contributing to that budget, so they might also have opinions on how to prioritize that wedding or that budget.
Right. Yeah. It definitely comes into play when parents are contributing because it basically gives them license to inject their opinions and wishes and wants into things. So you have to kind of like weigh the pros and cons of that when you're accepting money from your family to put towards the wedding. But I do think it's one of those things where you think, it is your day. It's about the two of you as a couple, but you're inviting these people to celebrate the day with you. So you do want to treat them to like as good of an experience as you can with the budget that you have to work with. So it's just always a good thing to keep in mind.
I think that's great. And it's a great segue for us to kind of talk about. So like, I think, like you mentioned, the guest experience is important. Obviously, budget, you have to keep that in mind. So what are some like top, budget saving tips, hacks that you've seen that you think work really well that maybe your guests won't even notice that you've kind of skimped in these places?
Yeah, I think there's so many things for every different single aspect of the wedding day. And obviously, I've got a lot of them on the website, but I'll run through some of my favorite ones of the moment right now. I think one of the best things you can do is choosing the right date for your wedding based on seasonality in your area. Certain seasons of the year are going to be more or less popular, and choosing an off-peak wedding date or choosing, a Friday night or a Sunday instead of a Saturday can really save you significantly. And really the only thing your guests will know is that you chose a different day of the week, but it might be a little bit more obvious than some of the other ways, but it's a really great way to cut costs on that. So another thing that I really like to suggest is when it comes to photography, since it is such a big priority for many couples, everybody wants those beautiful pictures to share on Facebook and Instagram. Yeah, I think finding, an up and coming photographer who's kind of new can be a really great way to save money on the photography. Of course, you want to find somebody who maybe has a little bit of experience and get some firsthand reviews in those cases, so you're sure that you're getting somebody who at least knows what they're doing. But it's been so interesting because I'm in so many different wedding planning Facebook groups, and there's lots of brides who are like, oh, I hired this photographer on Craigslist, and their photos are stunning. And I'm just like, oh, it's a student from my local university. And it's like, that's amazing. you hit the newbie photographer jackpot.
I think like a good thing with that too is definitely to make sure that you ask those questions, because you definitely want to be sure that the person you're hiring, you hear it on both sides, great finds and then terrible finds. So make sure you have a good list of questions that you're asking, making sure that they're, licensed and professional and all those things.
Absolutely. I think there's so many different resources out there, and I think there's a list in one of the chapters of my book about like questions to ask your photographer just to make sure all the bases are covered. So that's definitely important as well. But another thing with photography specifically is hiring a photographer for like a shorter amount of time instead of doing like the full 8, or sometimes I even see 10-hour packages. Like you don't really need that much. And if you structure your wedding day really well with a good timeline, you can get everything you need in a much shorter amount of time and save yourself on those extra hours of coverage. We recently published a post about staging your wedding exit. So instead of waiting until the actual end of your reception to do like the exit with your new spouse with sparklers or rice or confetti or whatever you choose to do, doing it kind of early in the reception and then letting the photographer go home. Because at the end of the day, like, they're only going to capture, pictures of people dancing or talking or mingling. They're not going to be the most important pictures you're going to hang on your wall. So in my opinion, you don't need them. Like, get it over with, get the staged exit photos, and then send your photographer home and save the money.
I agree, because also your dance photos also kind of start to look the same, and if you have a bar towards the end of the night, the pictures might start to look a little different. So you might not need to capture those. They're probably not going to be the ones you hang, like you said.
Exactly. Another thing that I really love right now is kind of the trend of purchasing pre-owned items for different aspects of your wedding, whether it's like your wedding dress or decor items, thanks to Facebook and Reddit and wedding resale groups and apps and all these different things. There's so many options for benefiting from another bride's purchases. You know, a lot of people are doing a lot of things themselves and buying a lot of things up front for their wedding, and you can get them at a steep discount by buying them from another bride. So I really love that. It's not something that existed back when I was getting married so much 10 years ago, but something that I'm seeing really, really growing as a trend, especially the dresses, you know, because like I said, so many brides have, you know, this picture in their head of like the dress they want to wear, and they might have like a specific designer in mind. And it can be like really disheartening for a bride on a budget because they're so expensive. And speaking as somebody who like really takes like the cost per wear into mind when I shop for just about anything for clothing, you know, you look at a wedding dress and it's like, you're only going to wear that once. Why would you spend that much money on it?
It is crazy when you think about it in that way.
It is. And so I really love, you know, sites like Nearly Newlywed and Still White. You can go and shop, browse online used wedding dresses, and they're gently used, pre-owned, and a lot of them have like good protections in place to ensure you're getting like what you are actually paying for, and you know, are backed by like PayPal buyer protection. So there's like a little bit less of a risk involved with things like that. And so I think it's awesome. Like why pay more when you can pay less? like pay less shoes. That's their slogan. But
so, it's very gently used.
yeah. I think it's amazing, and I think it's you know, something, especially if you have a designer dress in mind, is an excellent way to save 50% or more on the cost of your dress. And then you can put that extra money towards the other high priority items that do affect your guests and not just yourself.
I love that. That's such a good
You can have it all.
It's possible.
Yeah.
That's a great tip. I think that's amazing. So any other like cost saving ideas that you think, you know, really make a big difference in the bottom line, you know, when you're looking at that overall budget?
Yeah, one thing that tends to creep up and cause a lot of people stress when it comes to their budget is the bar. Yeah, like hosting a large group of people and giving them alcohol, you just never know like how it's going to go down or how much money it could cost. And so there's a lot of really great ways to keep your bar costs in check without, you know, like really depriving anybody of, you know, the gift of libations.
Courage for the dance floor.
Right, some liquid courage. So, you know, instead of doing a full open bar, like doing a signature drink and beer and wine is a great option. And choosing a signature cocktail that's not so heavy on the alcohol, like a spritzer or even like frosé, where they're, you know, kind of essentially watering down the alcohol, but it basically stretches it. And it's a really great way to stretch your alcohol budget. So I really like suggesting that. And then also, you know, you don't need a full arrangement or assortment of non-alcoholic beverages. Like just water and tea is fine. You don't need to have like 8 different varieties of sodas or juices or whatever else. Like that's just a good way to kind of keep some of those catering costs in check. Sorry.
No, that's a great suggestion, because you don't realize that the Cokes and the juices and all those things really do add up on that bottom line. So it's a great point that you can kind of eliminate those things and still give people a great experience. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And I think it's important to look through, you know, your catering contract and see like all those sort of items and how they add up. And just keep an eye out for them, because that's something that you can easily cut that's not going to make a big difference for your guests. And also finding a venue that will allow you to bring in your own alcohol, whether it's bringing in your own wine and liquor. You have more control over the cost per bottle in those cases. You know, when I was planning and looking at different venues, you know, one venue was charging $40 per bottle of wine, and I went to Trader Joe's and bought my own wine for $3 chuck or whatever. So Granted, I was very, very young and cheap, and we had to do it as inexpensively as possible. But
but even still, you could get a $10 bottle for significantly less if you're able to bring your own.
Absolutely. Then you're saving 75% off what the caterer would charge you. And so I think, finding a venue that would let you bring in your own alcohol is like a really, really great way to cut that cost out. And then another thing, speaking even as a former wedding invitation designer, I think you can totally DIY your wedding invitations. Like, I hope the invitation designers of the world don't come for me. But I used to be one, so I don't know. Now I give my templates away for free because there are so many great templates you can get online, on Creative Market, on Etsy, that you can customize yourself, like with Microsoft Word, or free trials of different softwares that you can download and use just to customize them. And all you really need is the time to put them together. You don't need professional design skills or anything like that, much to my dismay as a graphic designer. But it's something that if you have the time to invest and you want to save the money, you can easily do that yourself, and it's something your guests are not going to know the difference about in the end. So
I think that's a great point. That's some really good tips on how to kind of save a little bit of money on that budget. How do you, and I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball here, but how do you make sure, if you spend, a big chunk in the beginning, at that point, what are your best tips for kind of tracking that money and making sure that you're staying on budget and not overspending, at the beginning?
Yeah, I think it's so important. I definitely 100% recommend figuring out like your total budget from the beginning and having kind of that like maximum number that you're not willing to go over, just to use as a guidepost along the way. And then obviously you're booking those big ticket items in the beginning, like the venue and the photographer, things that are going to cost a bit more, and kind of front loading it. So maybe that's coming from your savings or from the money that your families have chipped in. But I always recommend too, like taking a look at your personal budget, your monthly budget for both you and your fiance, and seeing, ways that are, how much can you save each month to put towards the wedding? Or, maybe you even look at ways to like reduce your costs or your monthly expenses, cut back on something, cancel Netflix while you're engaged or whatever, to put that extra $10 or $15. They just raised the price. I think it's up to $13 or something like that now a month for Netflix, towards the wedding fund. Finding ways to combine things and reduce your monthly costs to put more towards the wedding, especially if you're working with a smaller budget and you're planning to take on a lot of that responsibility on your own. I think, making a plan for how you're going to save along the way is really important.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. Well, perfect. Well, tell us what are like best next steps when you're first talking about, budget. Kind of top things that couples need to do, and then we're going to tell our listeners about a really exciting giveaway that we have. So tell me next steps first.
So like for setting the wedding budget, I definitely think, like I said, looking at, what's your personal savings, what's your partner's personal savings, how much of that are you willing to kind of part with for this? And then also, as I mentioned, your monthly expenses, look at your income versus your monthly expenses, like your rent, your cell phone bill, those like non-negotiables. If you have debt, like look at what you're putting towards that every month. I am a huge Dave Ramsey fan. So growing up outside of Nashville, Tennessee, I was raised on Dave Ramsey. So I definitely recommend checking out his site if you feel like you need help in that area, because he's got so many great resources. And then once you kind of know like what you and your partner are each able to contribute, both from your personal savings and what you can save on a monthly basis, then maybe go outside and talk to your families and say, like, because it never wants to come from a place of expectation, right? Like some people's families aren't able to contribute and some are, and either way, it's totally fine. But, approaching your families and saying like, we're planning this wedding, and like whatever you feel able to give, like we would be so grateful to have, and come at it from that way. And then once they tell you if they are going to contribute, how much they're going to contribute, getting really clear with them on when they're going to be giving you that money, if they expect to have a say in the matter as a result of giving you that money. And also, are they hoping that it goes specifically towards certain items of the wedding? And do they want to say on those particular items, like, is it going to go to the venue, or is it going to go to the caterer, or whatever? Just get really clear about that so that those expectations are set up front, because it can avoid a lot of drama and stress when it comes to those money talks. So
money talks aren't fun, so just get them out of the way, right?
Yeah, and just be grateful for whatever you're able to get and do. So
I love that. Well, thank you, Jessica. And we are super excited. You guys hop onto Instagram today. On our Instagram at Bustld, Bustld. We are giving away Jessica's amazing book, The Budget Savvy Wedding Planner and Organizer. Checklists, worksheets, and essential tools to plan the perfect wedding on a small budget. She's got it right here on it for us. And I think the name says it all, but it is an Amazon bestseller, and it is part informative guide, part conversation starter to help you define your ideal wedding day and successfully execute every step of planning. So this is going to be a great tool to kind of start with the budget, and then a lot of other things along the way, it sounds like. So we are super excited to be giving this away. Follow us on Instagram, and we'll have information about how you can enter to win. Thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us today.
Oh, it was so fun. Thanks for having me.